All right, we're gonna do this by random people answering for me. Which of the following are sources of sampling error and which are sources of non-sampling error? A, the subject lies about past drug use. Sampling error or non-sampling error? Non.
Are you for real?
Yes, I'm for real.
It's the subject lying. It's not the whole thing. It's not somebody.
It has nothing to do with your sampling frame.
Yeah.
So it's not a sampling error. A typing error is made in recording the data.
Sampling error.
Non-sampling error. Data are gathered by asking people to mail in a coupon printed in a newspaper. Sampling error because it's a voluntary response sample, which is a bad sampling method. Comment on each of the following as a potential sample survey question. Is the question clear? Is it slanted toward a desired response? So the first sample survey question: which of the following best represents your opinion on gun control? 1, the government should confiscate our guns. 2, we have the right to keep and bear arms. Is the question clear? Yes, the question is clear. Which of the following best represents your opinion on gun control? Is it slanted?
Yes.
Yes. Which direction?
For or against gun control.
To keep. This word right here. It's got a negative connotation with it. No, that would be if we just threw it out there and said respond if you want to, but this is like going up to somebody and asking. So this is slanted towards answer 2 because confiscate tends to have a bad connotation with it. It's not like a good thing. It's like you're being prohibited. Sample survey question 2. A freeze in nuclear weapons should be favored because it would begin a much needed process to stop everyone in the world from building nuclear weapons now and reduce the possibility of nuclear war in the future. Do you agree or disagree?
Question is not clear.
The question is not clear. And is it slanted?
Yes.
Yes.
It says already should be favored. Do you?
Yep. So it's slanted towards the nuclear freeze, and it's unclear because it's one long, weird run-on sentence. All right, so today we're going to talk about observational studies and experiments and the difference between the two. All right, I lied. It says last year. It wasn't last year. It was a few years ago. North offered an after-school 8th period ACT prep class that students could volunteer to take. I used to teach the math portion, then one of the English teachers taught the English portion. 44 students took the course and then took the ACT. The average ACT score for this group was 23.2. The average ACT score for all students who did not take the prep class was 21.4. Can we conclude that taking the prep course will cause the student's ACT score to increase?
No,
Why not?
because it's not the same group. Because the same number of people weren't used for both groups.
That doesn't matter. We can compare groups that are not the same amount.
Relation doesn't equal causation.
Say it louder.
Relation doesn't equal causation.
So you're saying there's a relationship between their score and the class, but it did not necessarily cause.
Yes.
There is something else that makes it, I would agree, but there is something
It's
else.
like the people who want to do the ACT prep score are also like trying harder for the ACT.
I'm gonna use your wording and circle this word volunteer here. Or not circle, that's definitely more of a rectangle than a circle, but volunteer. That makes this what kind of sample? Voluntary response. So those that were taking the prep course, it was voluntary response. So we cannot say that it caused a student's score to increase. I'm also going to piggyback off of what you said, Seth. Correct me if I say it wrong. You said those that take it are willing to try harder, right? So that would be considered a lurking variable. I'm going to say it has to do with motivation. Like if you're going to give up time to take a class to help you get ready for a test, you probably have a little more motivation than somebody who wouldn't give up their time to take the class.
And you probably study more.
Study more. Any other lurking variables that might be a reason why those who took the class got higher scores? Yes.
You might know the questions more.
More familiar with the type of questions? What about just time?
We probably fill the time to, instead of waiting for, like if you ride a bus, waiting, or your parents, waiting for class and doing nothing versus sitting in an ACT class that would help you.
Right. Or if you work,
Yeah.
right? Somebody who doesn't work may be able to say, yeah, I want to take that class, but we know a lot of kids work after school and they tell their job, hey, I get out of school at 2:45, so they couldn't take an 8th period ACT prep class. So I would say time, working, riding a bus, like you said, Jillian. Those are all things that could factor into whether somebody could take the class or not. Ride bus. Let's just say bus. Sorry, I need to zoom out so we can see both sides. And then, like Annika said, we can't say that there's causation. We can say there's a relationship, but we cannot say there's causation. But there is something we could do so that we could show causation. We could make it an actual experiment where it's not a voluntary response sample. We would have to carefully design the experiment. To hopefully reduce those lurking variables. Experiment. I'm going to run into that blue, sorry. When we do an experiment, that allows us to show causation. When we do samples, surveys, or in a minute when we talk about observational studies, we cannot use those results to show causation. May I move it up? All right, so some new definitions. Observing individuals and measuring variables of interest, but without attempting to influence the response, is called an observational study. When you deliberately impose a treatment on individuals and then measure their response, it's called an experiment. The advantage of an experiment over an observational study is that it allows you to show causation. A variable that is not among the explanatory or response variables in a study, but that may influence the response variable, is called a lurking variable. Sometimes it's called a confounding variable. Lurking variables often lead to confounding, which is why we can call them confounding variables. So, we had our ACT prep class. And the ACT scores. Like Annika said, we can say there is a correlation between the two. There is some relationship between taking the class and getting higher scores. There's not causation because it was voluntary response. So people chose to take the class. There's all these lurking variables that affect the ACT scores that we listed above, like motivation, study time, studying more, being familiar with questions, familiarity.
Wait,
Ooh.
isn't that like,
I don't know if I spelled that word right.
but that's something they've learned in the ACT prep.
Uh-huh.
So why would that, so that does, you know what I'm saying? That's not,
So you're saying
is
that
this just directly
that
related to-
this comes from taking that,
Yeah,
okay?
so that's not a thing that's like,
Confounding.
yeah.
I could see where you would make that argument. I do think that because the voluntary response happens where the people volunteered to take the class, that it's a confounding variable that they're choosing to become more familiar with the questions. Did I make sense? Okay. All right, so when it comes to experiments, we have some special words we use. A specific condition applied to individuals in an experiment is called the treatment. The individuals to which treatments are applied are called experimental units. If those experimental units happen to be human beings, we change the name to subjects. The explanatory variables in an experiment are often called factors. and each factor can have several different levels. Now, I technically labeled the next one exit task, but we're going to do it together. And then you guys, do I have any juniors in here? Somebody, please be a junior. Thank you, Sam and Tanner. That means I get to stay here.
What's it for?
Aw, thanks, Nolan. All right, hold on. We got to finish this really quick. Does reducing screen brightness increase battery life in laptop computers? To find out, researchers obtained 30 new laptops of the same brand. They chose 15 of the computers at random and adjusted their screens to the brightest setting. The other 15 laptop screens were left at the default setting, which is moderate brightness. Researchers then measured how long each machine's battery lasted. Was this an observational study or an experiment? Experiment, because a treatment was imposed. They changed the brightness. I have till 10:35.
No, they want to stay by 10:35.
Ah. You think they're gonna start without you?
Yes.
No.
Bro, I need to get seats.
They just gotta talk for like 2 hours about nothing.
2 hours, bro. This is not.
How long is it?
We're supposed to be 15, 20 minutes.
Oh.
No, it'll take till the end of the period. Otherwise,